This happened when I was around 14 years old. I'm 30 now. I'm female, from the UK, and have always looked a bit younger than I am. I'm familiar with the paranormal. My personal experiences and those in my family could probably fill at least a small novella. But this is an unsettling experience with humans. My mother had taken my younger brother and I to visit my uncle, his wife, and our 3 female cousins who lived in a different town, about an hour away. I didn't really get along with my cousins, mostly because they were always telling me things to try and scare me or upset me. Like that their small collection of China dolls were possessed, hated me, and were just waiting for me to be alone, so that they could hunt me down and stab me to death. Or that the things in their attic would come and take me away, and I'd never be seen again. So on and so on. So whenever we visited, I would usually volunteer to take their dog Benji, a West Highlands Terrier, for a very long walk. As this meant I didn't have to spend time around my cousins, and usually by the time I got back, it was time for us to leave. Overall, a win-win situation from my perspective. On this particular visit, I was on my way back to my uncle's house after walking Benji, and was about 2 houses away from the entrance to the back garden, when 2 girls, I think one was blonde and the other was a brunette, both a little older than me, suddenly stepped out, seemingly from nowhere, into the road, deliberately blocking my way. The blonde one said, "What are you doing with Pip's dog?" Pip was the nickname one of my cousins was known by, so I assumed that they knew her from around the neighborhood. "Walking him?" I responded with a shrug. It was pretty obvious. I had Benji's lead in my hands, and the clip was attached to his collar. I mean, really, what else would I have been doing? "Who are you and why haven't we seen you before?" the brunette asked. "I'm her cousin, I'm just visiting." I remember that they looked at each other. One of them whispered to the other something like, "She looks the right age." Then they grinned and both took a step towards me, getting into my personal space, before the blonde girl said slowly, "There's a man down the street who can take people to Neverland. You want to go?" I told them no thanks because I wasn't stupid. I didn't believe in stuff like Neverland, and really didn't believe a man I'd never met could take me to a place that I knew didn't exist. Besides, my family had drummed the never go with strangers rule into me from a young age. "Come on," the second girl said, slowly and now in a coaxing tone. The sort of tone people use to talk to toddlers. "We can take you to him so he can take you to Neverland. You'll like it," the blonde one said in the same tone. "Seriously, you'll have a great time. Just come with us to see him, and he'll take you." "No thanks," I repeated firmly, trying to work out a way around them. Benji by now was baring his teeth, growling a little and beginning to tug on his lead. "I have to take the dog back." Benji usually loved everyone he met, but something about these 2 was obviously putting him on edge. Benji's aggressive behavior apparently didn't put them off, because once again, the 2 girls shared a look and then nodded at each other before the blonde one spoke. "Well, she," gesturing to her friend, "could take the dog back for you while you come with me. Then she can meet us there, and he'll take all 3 of us to Neverland." By now, the talking to a toddler tone was both creeping me out and pissing me off. It seemed like the more I turned down the offer to go, the more determined they were to convince me. Her friend started to reach out to take Benji's lead from me. "We've been before, it's amazing. Just let us take you to him." Before she could touch the lead though, Benji barked, which made her back off a little bit. "No, I can't. I really need to get going." Just as I was beginning to think about turning and running in the opposite direction, a car rolled up the road, and the driver honked the horn to get us to move. It wasn't a wide road, and there was no pavement, so the only option was to stand on the verge. The two weird girls moved to the left, while Benji and I went to the right. Just after the car passed, but before the two girls could move back to block the road again, the dog and I bolted the remaining distance to the back garden. It had a high fence and gate, which my uncle had put up entirely to stop Benji escaping. Just as I got inside the garden gate and closed it, I heard one of the girls say, still in that voice, "Come back, little girl. We just want to take you to Neverland." I grew up in a small town in the Piedmont region of Virginia. Rolling country hills, one high school, everyone was your neighbor, that sort of thing. It was me, my mother, my father, and my brother. And just for the purpose of the story, my brother is 6 years older than me. Well, my town was pretty small, as I said before. So small that my family, my grandmother and her husband, and my great-grandmother and her husband all lived in 3 separate houses, about 1 mile from each other. Once my great-grandfather died in 1989, my grandmother moved in with her mother to help take care of her. This didn't bother my grandmother, as her and her husband's house was only 500 feet down the gravel road. I don't remember too much about my great-granny. I just remember that she was always very grumpy, and she would always yell at my brother and I when we would go over to her house to play. My brother and I would do this because our house was very small, and our great-granny's house was a nice, big, Cape Cod-style house, with plenty of room to run around and spread out our toys. When our great-granny died in 1994, it took a toll on my family, because within that very same week, my grandfather passed away as well. This means my grandma lost her mom and her husband within about 5 days' time. I also need to mention that my great-granny was on hospice care, and she died in the comfort of her home, in her chair, surrounded by her family. When I got a little older, I started to remember more about that house, and really just how creepy it was. The upstairs in particular. My grandma ended up selling her and her husband's house down the road, and started permanently living in this one. Due to the trauma of losing her mother and husband in 1 week, she developed a pretty bad hoarding habit. Sometimes when my brother and I were visiting, my grandma would be occupied with her Avon downstairs, and we'd sneak upstairs to snoop through all 4 of the cluttered rooms. But one room up there always caught my attention. I would feel a deep feeling of unease or dread whenever I'd go near. It was just your normal room, very small, hardwood floors and only a twin bed and a small dresser. Oh, and a lot of junk like old Christmas boxes, Avon products, and my great-granny's worn clothes. But over in the corner of the room, right beside a small crawl-in storage area, was a mirror. I always found myself strangely attracted to this mirror for some reason. It gave me a scary sort of feeling, one I can still very much feel to this day. I often caught my brother staring into it as well. It wasn't until I started seeing this mirror in my dreams that I started to question its history. The dreams were very vivid and eerie. It was always nighttime. They started with me standing on the porch of the house, staring at the door. It was quiet all around me, with a slight breeze. A very warm and comfortable summer night. The dream progressed with me making my way into the house, except something was a bit off. I was floating, and whenever I'd enter a room, the door would open for me. All the lights were off inside, but I could still see from the full moon eerily casting its bright light through the open windows, the outside breeze making the curtains dance around. I will also say this. In the dream, I'm not scared. I'm not curious or dumbfounded. It's almost like I'm meant to be there. I make my way upstairs where I'm guided, each time to the same room. The room with the mirror. This is the part of the dream where I sense fear or dread. I make my way in front of the mirror, but oddly enough, I never see my reflection. I'm forced to stare at it when all of a sudden, an apparition of my great-granny appears. Her skin looks gray and cold, her eyes dark and hollow. The uneasy feeling grows more and more as I stare, and then I become aware that I'm dreaming. I'm scared to death now and need to wake myself up somehow. Then, all of a sudden, the image in the mirror turns truly sinister. Her mouth widens, and she lets out the most terrifying scream. This is when I wake up, covered in sweat. I had that exact same dream many times growing up, but I never knew its significance, if there was any at all. I never told anyone. Fast forward to about 4 years ago, 2012. My grandmother lost her battle to cancer on Mother's Day. My family and I took part in the huge responsibility of cleaning up that house, as we had plans to sell it and move to San Antonio. I had not had the dream for about 10 years, but when my brother and I, now in our 30s, had the duty of cleaning out that room, the eeriness of it all returned to me. He said, "We had a lot of fun times up here snooping around, didn't we, little brother?" I barely remember it, but yes, fun times, I replied. My brother lifted his finger and pointed. "Hey, do you remember that mirror right there?" "I do remember it," I said, "but why do you ask?" To which he replied, "Just wondering. I'm not sure if you ever knew, but that mirror was our great-granny's favorite mirror from her childhood. And it just so happens that right below the mirror, downstairs, sits the chair that our great-granny died in." As if that didn't make my skin crawl enough, he pauses for a second, and with a confused look, he says, "You know, for some reason, I used to have the strangest dreams about that mirror." My name is Kayden. I'm a 19-year-old male that lives in a small town in Kentucky. One night a few months ago, I was up late playing PS4, and at about 6:30 a.m., I decided to call it a night. But before I went to bed, I stepped outside to smoke the day's last cigarette. As I did, I remember pushing my dog back so she couldn't get outside and wake the neighbors up. So I'm sitting outside, and as I finish my cigarette, I go to open the door, and it's locked. Keep in mind, this door has 3 locks. One can only be locked from the inside, so I texted my brother, but no answer. After waiting a few minutes, I started walking around my backyard, looking for a chair, so I could climb through my window. At this time it was pretty light out, and what happened next scared the shit out of me. I was far in my backyard, and when I look up, I see this solid black human-shaped figure walking up my driveway. At this point I was so scared and shocked I didn't know what to do, so I just got down and watched it. It walked closer, but didn't really walk like a human, and had no face. As it got to my gate, I saw it disappear and reappear on my back porch, and it walked to my door and disappeared again. At this point, I'm scared out of my mind, not knowing what the fuck I just saw. So I walk closer to the house. At this point, I think someone might have broke in, so I charge up my porch and try to open the door. It was still locked. I grabbed a chair and climbed through my window, grabbed my baseball bat, and searched the house. Everyone was asleep. I told them about it the next day, and none of them locked that door. I don't know what did, but you will never catch me outside at the crack of dawn again. I believe what I saw that day was a shadow person, or maybe even an alien. About a week later, I saw a post on Facebook that said shadow figures are being spotted in eastern Kentucky. I live in eastern Kentucky. This happened to my sister and I a couple of days ago. We were on our way home, and we had missed the last bus of the night, so we had to walk from our city center. It was about an hour-and-a-half walk, and since we're both athletic, we could probably make it home in just under an hour. We were about halfway home when I started getting a really weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. Looking over my shoulder, I see a silhouette of a man. I whisper to my sister not to look, but of course she does, and she starts panicking. Grabbing her wrist, I speed up our pace and take the next left to see if he's actually following us, or if he's just out walking. Hiding behind some bushes, I hug my sister tightly and hold my breath. Moments later, I see him walking up the road towards the bushes. I look at my sister and whisper, "When he walks up to the roundabout, we will run as fast as we can." She nods. He passes us, and I wait for another minute before pulling my sister up to her feet. We climb out and sprint for about 10 minutes. When we stop for a breath, we sit in a bus stop, and I look to my right and see him again. Grabbing her, we speed walk and cross the road. I pull my phone out and dial my mom's number. Just as she answers, I feel my sister trip up. Crouching down, I check to see if she's okay, and soon the guy reaches us and places his hand on my shoulder. "Everything all right here, love?" he asks. He smells like sweat, beer, and cigarettes. "Fine, please don't touch me," I reply harshly, before lifting my sister up. When we get home, we start getting ready for bed. I looked out my window. I see the same guy standing outside in the street. He gives me a grin before taking a swig of beer. I closed the curtains and locked the doors. He eventually walked away, but I still stayed up all night, and I haven't seen him since. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. If you want me to tell your story or read a creepypasta, email me at the address in the description. Thank you to the people who submitted these stories. And now it's time for music that just doesn't work with scary stories. I peeked under the bridge. I saw her face. She was standing beneath the bridge, head cocked to the side to look at me on the grass. All the while, her little finger still in the hole, pointing at me. Her pale eyes stared right through me, with her stringy, damp hair clinging to the soggy skin on her face and neck. The quiet voice was coming from her. "I found you." I peeked under the bridge. I saw her face. She was standing beneath the bridge, head cocked to the side to look at me on the grass. All the while, her little finger still in the hole, pointing at me. Her pale eyes stared right through me, with her stringy, damp hair clinging to the soggy skin on her face and neck. The quiet voice was coming from her. "I found you." I peeked under the bridge. I saw her face. She was standing beneath the bridge, head cocked to the side to look at me on the grass. All the while, her little finger still in the hole, pointing at me. Her pale eyes stared right through me, with her stringy, damp hair clinging to the soggy skin on her face and neck. The quiet voice was coming from her. "I found you." Be good to animals, even people. See ya.
Scout, snämmar, Xmas, Rish.